information on diverse topics and timely issues that fulfill our mission to educate, enjoy, and engage. We are now in our 13th semester. It is easy to register for any class. Simply access our website at empoweruohio.org, scroll down to the class, and click on the register link. We would like to provide some of our classes are presented virtually online. Go to the website 10 minutes before start time and click on the Join in Class link.
And we also heard from Wendell Young, who wanted to be here tonight, and he really wanted to say a few words. He just couldn't make it. He had another commitment. And So what I wanted to do is start off. We're going to show you about a 7-minute video, a CNN video, just to kind of give you some background on sanctuary cities. If you're a little fuzzy about a few things, we're going to try to kind of define what that is before our speaker gets up. Then I'll introduce our speaker and we'll get going. And we're looking forward to a good session. So Andy, let's try to play the video and hopefully it will work.
An undocumented immigrant with 7 felony convictions who'd been deported 5 times to Mexico. The shooting happened just weeks after Donald Trump entered the presidential race, quickly became part of the heated debate over immigration policy. The lawsuit that the Steinleys filed takes aim at San Francisco's so-called sanctuary policy, which limits local law enforcement cooperation with federal immigration authorities. The upshot is when local authorities release an undocumented immigrant from jail, immigration agents aren't told. Hundreds of cities have similar sanctuary policies, including Chicago, where Pamela Brown went on an exclusive ride along with an ICE team. Here's what she saw.
Radio check.
Under the cloak of darkness in Chicago.
Tack 1, guys.
An immigration and customs enforcement team gears up another long day.
Copy.
Pursuing undocumented immigrants who have been convicted of crimes in the U.S.
We got 3 targets this morning.
Team Supervisor Sean Byers.
First 2, aggravated felons, drug trafficking. Each of them served at least 10 years in prison. The third one, there's possible guns in the situation, so we got to make sure that we're prepared for that as well. All right, let's roll, guys.
The undocumented convicts they're going after were all released from Cook County Jail without immigration officials being notified.
Your adrenaline blood pressure, of course, goes up when you're getting ready to do something like this. Bravo team in the neighborhood.
The first target?
Him in white?
A convicted cocaine dealer from Mexico who was arrested again, convicted of DUI, and released on probation.
This individual we could have already had from local authorities when he was arrested recently, which would have saved taxpayers a whole lot of dollars.
It turns out this is the target's brother. He's committed no crime and he's released. ICE officials say mistakes like this are made and endless man hours wasted trying to find people they could have picked up at the local jail, were it not for a Cook County law prohibiting local police and jail officials from even notifying ICE before releasing an undocumented criminal back onto the streets.
If we were able to arrest them while they're incarcerated in another law enforcement agency such as Cook County where they've been positively identified, it would be a much safer situation.
Next target.
A Mexican national who did 10 years in prison for dealing heroin in the U.S.
He was recently arrested for driving under the influence, and he's also been currently using a U.S. citizen's identity to be able to work and have a driver's license and everything else.
And ICE has had interaction with him before, right?
Yes, we've previously removed him at least once from the United States before, so he's been arrested, removed, and came back.
Cook County and Chicago are among the more than 300 so-called sanctuary jurisdictions across the country, including Miami, New York City, and Los Angeles.
I came to Chicago as an immigrant, 9 years of age.
Commissioner Chuy Garcia spearheaded the 4-year-old law in Cook County.
The reason that we came up with a policy in Cook for dealing with ICE detainers was because people were being stopped, arrested for minor infractions.
Garcia says the law prevents the deportation of innocent people, even though that means convicted criminals in the U.S. illegally are set free.
Why do these people belong in your community?
I'm not saying they belong in my community. What I'm saying is that the majority of immigrants are law-abiding, hardworking individuals making contributions to our country and our society.
As the sun rises on Chicago, the risk for the team ramps up.
The whole tempo of everything gets escalated.
Ma'am, can you open the doors to police?
There's a lot of risks when we're having to do this out in the street like this. You always risk to ourselves, the officers, risk to the innocent bystanders.
The team finds its third target, working at this auto shop on the north side of Chicago. A twice-deported felon with 2 DUI convictions, according to ICE.
Any weapons on you?
Then, agents realize his brother is also there.
So why are you checking the brother?
Based on preliminary, it looks like he's also illegal. So we're just going to verify with some of the new technology.
They use a new mobile fingerprint scanner on the brother to see if he's ever been stopped by immigration officials before.
Yeah, it's a hit.
And just then, An agent takes off as a third person runs out the back door. They catch him seconds later.
So if there's a hit with the biometric testing, he'll be brought into the processing center to see if there's a criminal history?
Yeah, we'll bring him in and go from there.
As the man's frightened wife watches, he admits he is in the U.S. illegally, but a quick check shows he has never had any interactions with federal officials before, so ICE lets him go.
Good luck to you, man.
Relieved, the man explains why he ran.
I was afraid.
Why?
I don't know. It's just how it is. I mean, sometimes they just take you and they don't care whatever they do. But this time, I mean, I guess I'm not one of those.
He's just one of 3 undocumented immigrants ICE let go during our ride-along, because even though they came to the U.S. illegally, they don't have criminal records, part of President Obama's initiative to focus on deporting convicted criminals, those considered a threat to public safety, and anyone caught crossing the border illegally after January 2014, including women and children. Head of Homeland Security, Secretary Jay Johnson, says that with nearly 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. right now, ICE has to prioritize who it goes after.
We're not interested in rounding up people who have been in this country for years, who have become integrated members of society, and who commit minor offenses and are released a couple of days later. We're interested in the worst of the worst and not releasing them to the streets.
Commissioner Garcia doesn't buy it.
When we were with ICE during the ride-along, they questioned, detained a couple undocumented immigrants who they then released because they didn't have criminal records.
I wish you could go on every ride that they take. That's not what happens in many, many cases.
We release on a daily basis, sometimes 2 to 3 times what we actually arrest.
All right, sir.
The team made 4 arrests this day. One they couldn't find, a convicted child molester who's already been deported once before.
It's very disconcerting that we can't arrest that individual today. That's why we're going to keep trying to get him. Every chance we get, we're going to try to get him. Our job's never done.
Convicted child molester already deported once. Pamela Brown joins us now. How does ICE know to pursue these undocumented convicts in the first place if they're not being...
A little bit to what we're getting ready to hear about. So I wanted to introduce David Mann, who was elected in November 2013 to serve on the Cincinnati City Council. He previously served on council for 18 years, including 3 distinguished years as mayor. Tonight, Vice Mayor Mann has said that what he'd like to do is take questions during his presentation. And so what we're going to ask you to do, anybody that's got a question at any time during his presentation, to raise your hand. I think we've got about close to 20 people online tonight. Hello to everybody. And so we'll need to get the microphone over to you so everybody can hear it, and they can also hear it online. So David was elected also to the 103rd Congress as the representative from Ohio's 1st Congressional District, which then included most of the city. David's earliest public service was serving in the United States Navy for 4 years. As a lieutenant, he served on the USS English, a destroyer that was one of the first ships to reach Cuban waters during the Cuban Missile Crisis. After his Navy service, David attended the Harvard Law School, where he was editor of the Harvard Law Review and graduated magna cum laude. Currently, David practices law with his son, Michael, at their firm Mann & Mann. His practice includes civil rights and discrimination cases on behalf of employees who have been treated improperly. David and his wife, Betsy, have been married close to 54 years. That deserves a round of applause, right? Congratulations. Betsy, glad you could join us. There are 3 children and 5 grandchildren, all 5 in Cincinnati. Each of them have attended Cincinnati Public Schools. Let's give a warm welcome to David Mann.
Make sure am I on? Okay. All right, Dan, thank you very much. Are we going to proceed in the dark, or? You know, actually, I thought this was the night for beer. So, I appreciate the chance to be here. I appreciate learning about Empire U, and I appreciate your program. And I've had some exposure to the program the University of Cincinnati has called OLLI, which is Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, which has many attendees. I've had a chance to speak there on a few occasions, and it's the same thing. People want to continue to learn as the years go by, and I agree totally with that. So I want to approach this opportunity in a couple ways. First, Betsy, my wife, and my assistants here are passing out 3 documents, which we'll be referring to as we go along. And the first one I want to focus on is the council resolution that Dan reacted to on February the 1st, you said? And I want to go quickly over that, and then I want to talk about other things, and then we'll come back to it. And as Dan said, it's probably going to be more interesting for you and for me if, as a question occurs to you along the way, let's have at it rather than holding all the questions to the end. And let me say, as Dan indicated, I've had what adds up to 28 years of public service, including 4 years in the United States Navy, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I care very much about my city and my country, and would not knowingly do anything that I thought was against the interest of either. I've also been a practicing attorney for 49 years, and I'm very careful, I try to be, not to do anything that is illegal or that is against, as I say, against the public interest. So that's the context in which we should approach, which is a very interesting question, and one that has garnered across the country a lot of interest. But first, let's talk about who we are. Now, Mann, we think, is a Scotch-Irish name, which means that my forebears, and Betsy and I are both from Kentucky, my forebears, because I'm pretty sure they were very poor, hightailed it out of Scotland and then Ireland as soon as they were able, came to Virginia, went across the mountains, and ended up in Kentucky. My mom, maiden name was a German maiden name, and her forebear came from Germany and ended up in rural Kentucky. Betsy's maiden name is pronounced Tolliver, but it's spelled T-A-L-I-A-F-E-R-O. Sounds pretty Italian to me. They claim it's English, but I don't know. But I would just wonder what you claim your heritage to be. Just a show of hands, how many of you are of German heritage? That reflects the reality of our area. Most of our citizens are from or have forebears who are from Germany. Is anybody here first generation German? Is there a first generation immigrant in the room? Just out of curiosity. How about Irish? How many of you are Irish? Almost as many as German. How about Italian? What about Jewish? What about Hispanic? What about African American? What about Asian? Okay. I'm sorry, Iranian, all right. Okay. Well, I was going to ask, any other? Are there any other countries I should cover? France, Poland? Scotland? England? Where else? Yes, sir? I'm also yes. Lebanon, okay. And I also, being from Kentucky, because of the county in which my mother was born, can, under federal guidelines, claim to be Appalachian. We obviously, in our community, have a lot of religious differences. We're Protestant. I'll bet you a lot in here are of Catholic faith. Is there anyone here that's Muslim? Is there anyone here that's anything other than Christian or Jewish? And you told me there were no first-generation immigrants. All right. Now, you should have the resolution now. So let's quickly go over it. Yeah, the lights would help. Okay. So this is a two-pager, and we'll come back and focus on it in more detail. Dan, you're right, it was passed February the 1st. But basically, as with all good resolutions, it has a lot of whereases, which as a matter of technicality are not substantive, have no substantive effect. And then the two paragraphs, two sections of the resolution, which are actually on the second page. Number one, section 1, the council expresses the desire for Cincinnati to be a welcoming and inclusive city for all immigrants to live, work, or visit by declaring that we're a sanctuary city. Section 2, the mayor and the council hereby request the administration, that's the city manager and all those that work for him, to adopt policies that further the city's role as a sanctuary city. A resolution under our city charter and under Ohio law is not a binding legislation. This is not an ordinance. It is an expression of council opinion, and it provides policy direction to the city manager and the city administration. And we'll come back later to what all that may mean. The second thing I want to focus on is this very interesting brochure that was prepared by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which recounts the history of immigrants and immigration in Cincinnati. And consistent with the rough survey we did here, the largest group of immigrants historically, and even today, there are a number of, a fairly high percentage of Cincinnati area citizens who are first generation German. And once, you have a large German population, there's a tendency for other immigrants to come here. But the largest early immigrant group were the Germans, followed by the Irish, and then the Jewish citizens, forebears, have come pretty consistently in smaller numbers. The chart like so, the vertical size of the bar is the quantity, and the horizontal bar represents the years that this was taking place. And obviously, the African American population, a large influx came as the Civil War ended, and then of course after World War II, there was a tremendous influx from the South of African Americans fleeing some of the discrimination there. And then, as you'll see, Appalachians came post-war. Have any of you read the book Hillbilly Elegy? It's a great book that was published just before the election by a gentleman named Vance, who had grown up in Middletown. His grandparents had come to Middletown from the hills of Kentucky seeking opportunity. His grandfather had worked for Armco Steel, and then things didn't go as well in terms of the number of jobs with Armco Steel. His mother, he's 32 now, I think. His mother wasn't the best guide for him. He had a number of stepfathers, a number of boyfriends. His mom went through a period of substance abuse. The only thing there were two things that saved him. It's really a powerful book, particularly for somebody from Kentucky. Number one was his grandmother, who was from the hills of Kentucky, had a mouth like a sailor, carried a pistol, but showed him again and again that he mattered to her, and she expected him to be accountable to her. And of course, that's all most of us need. One or two people really care about us, and that got him through high school. And then he joined the Marines, and the Marines were the second factor. 4 years in the Marines, and he came back and went to Ohio State, graduated summa cum laude. and then got a free ride at Yale Law School, and wrote this wonderful book, went to California, became fairly affluent, I think, in finance, and since the election, has been on a lot of cable talk shows talking about his understanding of why so many people were surprised at the success of Trump, and why the group, the demographic that he came from, supported Trump in such surprising numbers. And I think most recently he's been talking about coming back to Ohio and pursuing an interest in elective office, perhaps in this area, perhaps in the Columbus area. And he says, as a conservative office holder. So Dan, I don't know whether you've had a chance to meet him yet, but I think he will be a person of great interest to the Republican Party. As I say, Vance is his name, and it's a great book. But something else that this booklet reminds us of is that there's been a history, and of course, we are unique in the world because everybody here is from a parentage, a line that came from someplace else. Someone reminded me that even Native Americans came from someplace else because they came across they're believed to have come across the bridge from Asia through Alaska thousands of years ago. But apart from Native Americans, every last one of us are here because at some point a forebear decided to make a tremendous decision filled with risk, filled with challenge, and to cross that big ocean. Now, I crossed the big ocean 10 times in my destroyer, but we had, it wasn't sails, it was turbo, it was power generated by steam and oil provided by the U.S. taxpayer. But there have been a succession of immigrants who have come here, and because they're different than what came before, they've suffered discrimination. They've suffered the sense of being not included. And this great book, pamphlet, reminds us of some of the stereotypes that in turn Germans, Irish, African Americans, Jews, Appalachians, and now Hispanics have had to work through and survive. And I think it's important as we talk about Sanctuary City and those issues that we not forget our history, because it's being played out again with those who are Hispanic, those who come from the Middle East, those who are Muslims. Now let's talk about the economic impact of immigrants in our community. Just some statistics. Immigrants make up less than 4% of our regional population, but in terms of annual spending power, $1.5 billion. Immigrants make up, even though they're just less than 4% of our population, they're 10% of all workers in our region in the STEM areas. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. Foreign-born residents made up over 10% of the population growth from 2007 to 2012. This is interesting. 71% of the immigrants coming to the Cincinnati region in 2012 were from other parts of Ohio or the U.S. The top countries of birth for Cincinnati immigrants now are Western Europe, East Africa, Central and Western Asia, and India. From 2000 to 2013, 100% of the growth in Main Street businesses was from foreign-born business owners. Now, what's a Main Street business? That's a small retail enterprise that we would expect to see on Main Street. A hardware store, convenience store, an Indian restaurant, obviously Chinese restaurant, and the like. I'm sorry? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm talking, yeah, I know.
I'd ask if you've got a question, please raise your hand. We'll take one at a time, please.
There's a question back there. Yes, sir. Or
hold on just a second, please.
Is it working?
appreciate you coming up here and
Sure.
trying to make your argument. But it really doesn't, just frankly, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Basically, you're saying that you're making a point that's analogous to saying that if I break into your house and then make the claim that, well, look, I haven't beaten anyone up, I haven't stolen anything, and if you let me hang around, I'll wash your windows. That gives me a right that how the owner of that house object to me being there. That's analogous to part of the argument you're making. The other is about migration, immigration. You're saying that because we all, if we go back far enough, are the result of other immigrants' country. That's it to say that the people who have sovereign control of a space or a nation never have a right to say enough. And one thing I wanted to point out to you specifically that your position now is completely in conflict with what it was when you were a congressman. At that time, doing your due diligence and hard work to produce laws that we all agreed we would be bound by, that's what it takes to have a viable community or nation. What would you have thought then if you came out of there and doing your due diligence hard work and some city had formally declared that they're going to stand in opposition to that? That in spite of the elected people having decided on a due process of how we should go, how we should live, that it's necessary to be bound by the laws, someone just, a city just flagrantly said, we don't like it, we reject it, so for our own reasons, we're going to stand in opposition to it. What would have been your position?
Let me get to that. I want to come back to I want to lay more background, okay? And then I want to look at the details of our resolution and talk about whether it violates any law or not. Our belief, the belief of our city solicitor, is that it does not. And we'll get back to that if I may. The point of the statistics I'm looking at is that immigrants, legal or illegal, have made a very positive economic impact on our country and on us. Well,
excuse me, sir. Sir, one at a time. Let's let Vice Mayor have a couple more words, and then we'll take more questions. You'll be first, sir.
Well, what I was looking at were the details economically of what it has meant to have immigrants in our community. Immigrants pay locally $189 million in state and local taxes annually. Foreign-born households, legal or illegal, who are working contribute to federal social programs like Social Security and Medicare. If you're working, Social Security and Medicare taxes are paid by you, whether or not you're developing any benefits for yourself. In 2012, the latest numbers we had, foreign-born households in the metro area contributed more than $266 million to Social Security, $60 million to Medicare. Immigrants are 2 to 4 times more likely than native-born citizens to start a business. 23% of the immigrants over age 25 hold advanced degrees, compared to 10% of natives. Ohio cities with welcoming initiatives include Columbus, Cleveland, Dayton, Toledo, Akron. Outside of Ohio, competitive cities with welcoming initiatives are St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Louisville, Detroit, Nashville. Welcoming policy, and if we had attracted the same number of immigrants proportionally as Dayton had in the last 5 years, our population would have grown rather than declined slightly. Now, one more thing by way of background. In the third handout that I gave you is the report the Immigration Task Force that Mayor Cranley appointed in 2014. A lot of good citizens worked very hard for several months to come up with recommendations. The first, and on page 1, you see the short-term goals. And the first two, creation of a center for new Cincinnatians, and this has nothing to do with legal or illegal, and the creation of an online immigration center were embraced and have been adopted by the Chamber of Commerce, which has a online Cincinnati Compass Center. It receives financial support from NKU, Xavier, University of Cincinnati, the Chamber of Commerce, and the City of Cincinnati. And what it does is it's a location where those who are new to our community can learn about resources that are available, learn about networking for jobs and the like. Another recommendation that you may have heard about is on page, bottom of page 3. And this is something that I personally was heavily involved in. It was wage enforcement. We learned that folks for whom English is a second language or not a very good language are often victimized in the workplace. They're victimized because they don't understand what their rights are as employees. They don't know that they're entitled to overtime. They don't know that it's not proper to be paid cash under the table. They don't know that it's not proper to not withhold income taxes. Governments lose money because of this, so we have a pretty aggressive, we call it wage theft ordinance, that applies to companies that have contracts with the city. If you have a contract with the city and you cheat your employees in any of these ways, we're going to come after you. We're going to take back any money that you have received by way of subsidy, and if your behavior has been egregious enough, you're going to be debarred from any future business with the city for a period of time. As Christopher Smitherman said when he voted to support this, how can anybody be in favor of cheating workers? And one of the class of beneficiaries are those who are new to our community, new to our society, don't understand what kind of rights they have as employees. On the next page, at the top of page 4, we've collaborated with a faith-based community. There's something called MARC, Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition of Cincinnati, and we've developed, or MARC has developed, an ID that is recognized by the city in the case of interactions with the police. These are folks who, for some reason, many of them are not documented. An ID can help them on certain occasions. And this MARC and the Catholic Charities have developed a process. It's very popular with those that have a need, and the ID is a way to provide them some opportunity to avoid arrest when they shouldn't be arrested. It proves that who they are. Yes, ma'am. I think you need the mic, so.
Test.
Hi, I'm Linda Caudell. I feel like there's a big distinction here between what's illegal and people who are legal. And people who are here legally as immigrants are vetted, at least we hope that they're vetted. But I want to read you something that from just a couple days ago. You talked about immigrants having businesses. Well, this is a person who has a business. An undocumented immigrant was arrested Wednesday on multiple charges after police say he abandoned a moving vehicle in Fairfield with 2 young children inside. Julio Cesar Ledesmo Sanchez, 30 years old, was on Route 4 near Mulhauser Road when deputies attempted to stop the vehicle. He leaped from the car, rolled into a ditch, and the children were still inside. Canine team found him and took him into custody. The Butler County Sheriff's Office reported that he had been deported twice before. They then issued a search warrant. They found 2 pounds of cocaine, 12 pounds of marijuana, and $9,000 in cash. He now faces charges of trafficking, possession of drugs, resisting arrest, failure to comply, 2 counts of child endangerment. I mean, this is an illegal. You know, we don't have the ability to vet these people, and yet you as a city leader is wanting to allow these people to be amongst us.
Yeah. Here's another question right here.
My name's Irene, and I would always welcome an immigrant. I don't have any problem with any immigrant from anywhere, but it's legal immigrants. And you're telling us how much these people give to our economy, but how much do they take away from us in police, fire, healthcare, social services, housing, jails, food stamps, etc. And another thing, you say that immigrants start more businesses, and they can start more businesses because they have more tax credits available to them, and they also have more grants and stuff available to them. So, you know, that's kind of a moot point. Maybe if they weren't getting all the breaks, everybody could start small businesses. You know?
Well, look, okay. Let me just say a couple things. First of all, I have nothing to do with the borders of this country. What I'm trying to do, and what I think city leaders are trying to do, is the reality that this country, what's the number, 11 million, 12 million folks who are not documented, who came across the border. Some of them came as children and are now adults. The reality is that many of those people, and in Cincinnati, we don't have large numbers proportionally to San Diego or Chicago or a number of communities around the country. But the question is, what do we do with respect to folks that are here? I don't think it's true that if you're undocumented, you're entitled to participate in any of these programs. It's true that if you work, it's true that if you work, you're obliged to pay taxes. But if you're not a citizen or not here legally, you're not entitled, if you reach retirement age, to receive Social Security or Medicare. Now, at some point, I'd like to go over the resolution and talk about the legality of it. I've been trying to lay the foundation, and I understand there's the argument that we need to distinguish between legal and illegal, and if we could just go over the resolution, and then I'll take all the questions. So the resolution, as I told you before, the whereases kind of set the stage, and the third whereas is pretty important. We want victims of crime, we want witnesses to crime to feel perfectly free to call our police department and seek help. We don't want them to fail to do that because they think it may be a trip out of the country. And this has happened in communities where police departments have a different policy. So that's what the third whereas is about. And this was developed in collaboration with our police chief. And the fact is that the next whereas makes the point that no other city department inquires into the immigration status of individuals that we serve. And the sixth whereas, the threat of deportation or prosecution for no reason other than immigration status may discourage residents without legal status or who have family members without legal status, it's the same point, from reporting crimes or injuries, cooperating in investigations, seeking opportunities, and so forth. The next whereas is very important. Federal law does not require local law enforcement or other local service providers to inquire into an immigrant's status or to respond to ICE detainer request. So let me be clear. It has long been the policy of our Cincinnati police, when they're responding to a call for service, not to concern themselves with the documentation status, the citizenship status, the residency status of a person who calls, a person who is a witness, a person who is a victim, a person who is alleged to have committed a crime. What our police do is what they would do for any person under those circumstances. If they're believed to have committed a crime, they're taken to the Justice Center. That's all. Now, the Justice Center, and this is very important because some communities have a different procedure. Apparently, the procedure is different in Chicago. The person who's arrested is turned over to the sheriff, and the sheriff's processing, as a matter of course, is to inquire as to the immigrant status and to inform ICE if there is believed to be somebody who is not documented. So it happens. It's not true that somebody arrested in Cincinnati doesn't have his or her immigration status reported to the federal government. It's done by the sheriff that we have no control over, not by our police. Now, I want to look at, again, at sections 1 and 2 of the resolution, and this is the substantive part of it. Number 1, the mayor and the council hereby express a desire for Cincinnati to be a welcoming and inclusive city for all immigrants to live, work, or visit by declaring the city to be a sanctuary city. That is a declaration, not that changes anything, but a declaration that says, we're glad you're here, we welcome you. That's all. It has no other impact. Section 2, the mayor and the council hereby request the administration to adopt policies that further the city's role as a sanctuary city. That's all. We're not saying that we're not going to, if ICE asks us to cooperate with you, we do. But otherwise, we don't take any responsibility for your documentation status. That's not what we do. Our police have plenty to do worrying about drugs, worrying about violence, worrying about people who are on the streets not treating people properly.
Question right here.
Sure.
My name's Alan. The problem that I have with the whole idea, the whole concept of sanctuary cities is numerous. And I'm going to try to
I'm sorry.
I have numerous problems with the idea, and I'm going to try to cover that very quickly. Number one, recently, I've been keeping track of this in the media, and they tried to reference scripture justification for sanctuary cities. And that's completely inaccurate because according to scripture, the idea of sanctuary cities were for individuals that had accidentally committed death, manslaughter, or negligent homicide. So it's totally inappropriate to try and reference scripture when doing that. And I feel like that's a clandestine activity on the behalf of those people who are interested in this place being a sanctuary city. Number 2, the idea that sanctuary cities is a place for aid or relief is absolutely, once again, inaccurate, because when you look at sanctuary cities, it poses a public safety issue, a security issue. It poses an issue with economics as far as the cost that we have to incur as a city, and the impact that it has. It also has a negative impact on our American culture. See, a lot of people don't want to talk about that because when you start talking about the impact that it has on American culture, they want to refer to you as a racist. And hold on. Now the problem, and I'm going to be very particular about this whole cultural thing. The whole thing, as far as it pertains to American culture, their culture, because you also referenced Syrian refugees, point to them in particular, their culture is not on par with our culture. Now, there's this misconception in the diversity community that all cultures are created equal. That's absolutely not true. I'll give you an example with reference to Arab Muslim culture. Number 1, they believe in the persecution of women and homosexuals. They believe in murdering women and homosexuals. They identify with Sharia law, and they believe in the caliphate, which is the complete subjugation of our American system, whether you're talking about our legal system. And if we really want to, oh, Lord have mercy. I got so much I could cover if he didn't take this mic.
This gentleman right here has a question. We want to take as many questions as we can tonight.
Yes, my name is Dr. Kiani. I used to be former refugee from Iran, a U.S. citizen now. I ran for Congress. Thank you, thank you. But the reason America is great is not even its democracy. It's a country of law. That is very important because you cannot legalize illegality. You cannot call a bank robber a person who withdraw money without having an account. You cannot sugarcoat things. You cannot call a rapist an uninvited gigolo. Or you cannot call, a murderer an unofficial neutralizer, These are very beautiful words that you're using, but you're covering the fact that you are on the side of what? Politics, not the law that made this land great.
Let's let the Vice Mayor answer, please.
Well,
Respond.
I think there's a difference between somebody who murders and tries to explain it away or robs them, and someone who, in pursuit of a better life, has ended up here. And as I say, I agree that no one should be allowed in this country except by legal means. But there are 11 million, 12 million people here. They're here. And we can act like they're not here, or we can act like we can send them all back. We can't do that. No, we can't. Well, for one thing, let me finish first. Let me finish.
If we could take one question at a time, please. Thank you. Go ahead. You've got the floor.
If we send them all back, we're not going to have any strawberries we can afford. It's not a lot.
We have a question. If I could have your attention, please, one question at a time. We've got an online question for you, Vice Mayor. Could you ask the speaker if he obtained into this organization, welcomingamerica.org?
Did I?
Yeah. Or if the council did. It's just a question.
Not that I know of. No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
And I think I want to get back to there's a danger that we start talking about how our culture is different than another culture. Each of us we're different, and they came to this country and we amalgamated, and we're quite different than we were. We're not German, we're not French, we're not Irish, we're not African, we're not Iranian, we are American. And to say that somehow this particular group is somehow going to subvert what we stand for, I don't agree with that. It's an honest difference of opinion, perhaps. And in the process, I don't want us to lose our humanity as we worry about people who are different.
Question right here.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Tony, and you passed out Mayor Cranley's task force on immigration.
Right.
This could only take place if we are a sanctuary city?
No, not at all.
We can't accomplish this without being a sanctuary city?
Of course.
Then why do we have to be a sanctuary city if we're already doing these wonderful things?
I didn't mean to say we did. I'm just trying to lay the background and let us take the action we did in February.
Question right here.
Ms. Thomas?
Thank you for coming tonight.
Sure.
And she kind of answered my question. If we're not going to change anything, I understand if the police pick someone up and they find out they're here illegally, they will inform ICE. So they are going to follow the rule of law. Is that correct?
At the Justice Center, yeah.
Okay. So why did we declare ourselves a sanctuary city if we're not changing anything?
The symbolism of it, I mean, the reality is,
Please, let's let our speaker speak. Thank you.
It is important to be mindful that nothing that the police do is changing. The Justice Center does the things that inform ICE. The Justice Center is not an arm of the city. It's not something that we control. Yes, The assumption seems to be that we changed a bunch of things. We did not. And that's why I wanted to focus on the language of the resolution, which essentially says, we want you to believe this is a welcoming community. That's all.
Question right here, please.
So those who think it's a good idea probably give it too much praise because it doesn't do perhaps what people expected would do. People who feel uncomfortable with it probably are devoting too much energy against it because it doesn't do the things that they're assuming it does. That's the reality. Yes?
Earlier, my name's Ron. Earlier, you talked about this resolution, and you read the first couple lines of the resolution, and you said that basically the resolution has no power behind it. It's just basically a feel-good type of thing. But if you read the last line, it says, and requesting the administration to adopt policies that further the city's role as a sanctuary city. So what you're trying to do is, through laws, or through programs, you're trying to change the laws. Second thing,
well, that's not true.
That's what it says right there. Second thing that bothers me is my great-grandparents were immigrants. They came here legally, not illegally. And we did that because we had a quota that we were meeting on a yearly basis. And the reason why there was a quota was that so these legal immigrants could assimilate into this country.
Question.
Dan's deciding, I guess. Yeah. Yes.
I really want to thank you for coming.
Sure.
Because my name is Melva. I'm sure you know me. Anyway, because obviously the rest of council are in their safe places, and they got you out here as a veteran.
They're in their sanctuary.
Okay. But you know what? It is awfully hard to believe, even when we talk about laws and following laws, when you see what has happened to this city. And for me, I am so tired. I am sick and tired of every time somebody wants to one-up on us, somebody from another country or whatever, or is behaving badly, that I'm all of a sudden a racist. I am not tolerant. I am whatever. And the laws are bent constantly. So, if we have laws that apply to everyone, and these people should come in legally, and to have them here, so they will be another group that will need to walk around, and if they don't like something, if they don't get their welfare or whatever it is, because this is completely different than the attitude that people came in with from other countries years before. And some still come in now with that attitude, they want to assimilate. But all over this world, in other countries, people that are coming in, they are separating out and they are causing havoc. My husband is from England, and I saw that long before it started happening here.
Let me just be clear. If you are illegal, my understanding is you have no right to collect welfare or any other benefits.
Question, and anytime you want to respond, David, please.
Sure.
Yeah, again, I want to thank you for coming. My name is Rose, and I knew we were a sanctuary city about a month, maybe a couple of weeks, before you even had your council meeting and you called yourself sanctuary cities. The proof is that we have this ID card, the city ID card, okay, that all an immigrant has to do, okay, is show the national ID card from the city, from the country of origin, which will have their picture, and say their name and where they were born. And then all they need to do is show that they are a resident of Cincinnati. And they are entitled to this ID card. And that makes them entitled to all the city services. Yes, it does. Okay? Yes, it does. And I said, wait a minute. We're a sanctuary city. Okay? If you're undocumented, or as we like to say it, it's more real. We live in Realsville over here. if you're an illegal immigrant, okay, then you shouldn't have a social security number. But they do, okay? Because they're stolen, all right? And then they have a job, all right? And nobody asks any questions. They keep a blind eye. And I'm saying, if we have problems with our immigration law, that's up to our legislators to set the law straight, to make it fair and equitable, okay? But any immigrant that comes to America, okay, should have the desire to live under the U.S. Constitution and the laws of the state and the city in which they live, because we believe not in an individual as being supreme, but in the rule of law. Equal protection under the law. We're all seen equal under the law. Lady Justice is blindfolded. All right? So what do you have to say about that?
Pardon me. Well, first of all, the local ID is not issued by the city. It's an ID that's issued by, as I said, the
Corporation of Cincinnati Police Department.
no,
It says it right here. And I know that because the gentleman that runs that office was wearing a Cincinnati police uniform with the white hat, you know?
Thank you.
Well, I mean, perhaps I'm wrong. I can only tell you my understanding. And my understanding is that, well, you keep, well.
Thank you.
Well, you keep saying I'm wrong. Maybe I am. I'm humble enough to believe I might be wrong, but I think I'm right. And you can say I'm wrong. That's fine. But my understanding, and I know this is the fact, the program is that the ID is issued not by the city, not by the police, but by the Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition of Cincinnati. That's who issues it. Now, it's true that the city has decided for identification purposes when an officer wants to know who you are to recognize it. Because, yes, go ahead.
Question. Yes, my name is Jim. I live in Westwood. I just want to say I agree with Mr. Mann about the part about immigration has been great for our country over the years since the beginning. But illegal immigration is not good for our city. It's not good for our country. We, in this resolution that you passed, right here it says, and this kind of covers the whole thing, it says regardless of their federal immigration status, in the second whereas. That's what kills this whole thing. Everything is, oh, we want to be nice to immigrants, we want to be welcoming. Of course we do. But not regardless of immigration status. That's what makes this sanctuary city harboring criminals. That's what makes you wanting to harbor criminals, okay? And the other thing is, you know, we're all getting older and everything. I know you're going to retire from politics someday and everything. I just hope you never get a job as like a Walmart security guy. We have the highest shoplifted Walmart in the country right here in Westwood. But if you were watching the cameras, you couldn't, you know, make a distinction between a shopper and a shoplifter. Because you're talking all this time about all these nice immigrants, which we all are, you know, that's beautiful, but we're not all criminals. And if you can't get that basic concept understood, I don't think there's even a reason to talk about this. Vice Mayor, before we go to the next question, do you have a message that you can share with the audience from Mayor Cranley on this issue?
Do I understand what the audience thinks?
No, do you have a message? I know he's very passionate about this decision, and any comment?
No, you know, I'm a separately elected member of council. He was kind enough under the charter to pick me to be the vice mayor. He can unpick me tomorrow, and I'll still be an elected member of council. No, I mean, he needs to speak for himself, but obviously 6 of us believe that this was an important thing to do. And I do understand the difference. And I'm trying to say, you know, the status of the citizens in our community is not something I had anything to do with. My memory is when I had my brief time in Congress, immigration wasn't something that occupied our time. The reality is that we have human beings in our community who we need to recognize their presence, respect them, and I'm not talking about people who have committed acts of violence or acts of property violence. It's true that they're not here legally, therefore what? I mean, I don't want our police wasting their time worrying about the status of people that are stopped. That's not what we need. We don't have enough police anyway, and we need to take care of serious crimes against people.
Let's take one more question.
Yeah.
First name, please.
My name is Robert. It seems like to some degree that the illegals themselves, you referenced that you don't want victims of crime not to come forward. It seems like to some degree that they know their status more than elected officials such as yourself that want to ignore the fact that they're illegal. They know they're illegal, and that's why that they're not going to law enforcement, because they know that by their very presence in this country, they are breaking the law. You mentioned that they add so much economically. I think there's a growing recognition that there's something more to a nation besides, and for too long we cared just about economic considerations. We care about the culture and foundation of our country, which is built by the people in it. You mentioned that they get cheated because they don't learn the language. I don't think anyone here, more than likely, has not been annoyed by someone in their presence speaking a foreign language when they shouldn't be in this country unless they have learned the language. During the 1960s, after a prolonged fight that lasted over decades, there was you want to muddy the water when it comes to immigrants, land of immigrants. It was a fact that before the law was changed, headed by the efforts of Ted Kennedy, Jacob Javits, and Emmanuel Seller, that there was an established policy that this country stay 90% immigrants from European countries because there was an interest in keeping the culture and the way of life a European way of life, and that not all immigrants are going to add to this country the way other immigrants might. I also want to ask you whether or not you will make a pledge or not. She mentioned the fact that this recent incident with the DUI with the children. It is a fact that in Latino culture, that it is an expression of machismo, and you can look this up for yourself. It is an expression of machismo to drink and drive. That you're less of a man if you drink and you drive. This is the kind of thing we don't want in this country. Let me ask you if you'll make this pledge, because I don't think there's much accountability when it comes to and we see Donald Trump now going to have an office of immigrant violence, victims of immigrant violence. I think it's finally giving voice. I think everyone on this council that wants to support this should also make the pledge that they will resign their position the first time there's a nefarious act or an adverse effect on a citizen by one of these people that you give refuge to. Question.
Oh, thank you. My name is Sarah, and my career has been primarily working with social services. I'm an ESL tutor. I've worked with job placement and job skills. I come from a family, I'm first generation American. My grandparents on both sides, Germany, Scotland, Norway, another German. I'm the only one of my generation that married an American citizen. My cousins, my brother, all married foreigners, and we're very close. And I can tell you, their partners were elated the day they became a citizen. They worked for it. They were proud of it. There was no question about their loyalties. And I remember my father saying, when his mother came here, she'd speak German at home and English outside. And that's my simple view of the whole situation. And a very petty thing on my part is, I'm tired of making a phone call and being asked, do I want to speak English?
I just want to say one thing. This is a big world, and there are a lot of different cultures, a lot of different races, and the idea that what America stands for is well served by maintaining the same proportion of Caucasians is so inconsistent with what I think this country is about. I totally disagree with that.
Vice Mayor, do you have any comment on I guess, what we've heard about? If we could, sir, you've had your time, please. If you could comment on Josh Mandel's proposed legislation with respect to holding the people that name sanctuary cities, just your comment, either good or bad.
Well, that's totally unconstitutional. I mean, it doesn't deserve a comment, really.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question. First name, please.
My name's Joe, and earlier you made a comment about how if the 11 million went back that there would be no one to pick strawberries and stuff like that. Well, I recently graduated high school a couple of years ago, and I know so many people that don't have jobs, or they have jobs that pay so little that they still apply for food stamps and all this other stuff and they're on assistance. Maybe if the 11 million went back, they would be able to get a higher paying job and that they wouldn't be sucking government resources. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't agree with that. I mean, the reality is that the economy of California is highly, highly dependent on workers from Mexico, many of whom are here illegally. I mean,
David, we're going to take a couple more questions, okay? Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Terry. You've cited some statistics, and I have some. I haven't vetted these. They are from a website, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. It's called FAIR. They say, this is the state of Ohio. Illegal aliens cost taxpayers $879 million in state and local costs. That includes all kind of education, healthcare, law and justice, public assistant, government services. They pay taxes to the tune of $38 million, which leaves a deficit of $841 million. So in your resolution, you referenced that we want to continue to make our services available to all of its residents, regardless of the federal immigration status. So while they may pay taxes, and I would like to say that many illegals file taxes, get a federal tax credit, and do not pay taxes, which is a big distinction people forget. Paying taxes and filing taxes are different. It's costing the taxpayers a lot of money. So these are my three questions. How much debt should we take on as a nation to absorb people that would like to come here and live off of our largesse? The second question is, how many people in the world should we allow to come into our country? Is there going to be a limit? Can anybody come in here just because they don't have a good life where they live? We do have a refugee program for people that are being persecuted. And to this gentleman's comment, I am so tired of hearing about we don't have agricultural workers. If you can live in New York State as a family of four and collect total through state, federal, local assistance, $30,000 to $50,000, if we had welfare reform, don't you think a lot of those people would be willing to be agricultural workers, would be willing to be gardeners, maids in hotels? So for me, it's a false dilemma when we hear politicians say, we don't have Americans that want to do these jobs. We have Americans that the government has given them the incentive to not want to work. So I think this just perpetrates that.
We'll take one last question, and then you've got the floor to give us your conclusions.
Okay.
Would you say your first name, please?
Hi, I'm Sean. Earlier you mentioned the undocumented workers and how all of these undocumented workers, they somehow add to the economy. Other members or other people here have mentioned Social Security and how these people are taking away from Social Security. Well, how are these people getting these jobs without a Social Security number? Now, I worked in the restaurant business for many, many years, these Main Street businesses that you're referring to. And let me tell you, there is massive, huge Social Security fraud going on in this country. The same way they're able to get these jobs and work illegally is the same way that they're able to take out social benefits. You say that the sanctuary city is all about symbolism, but if you look around, these are your constituents. And it seems like they don't care much about your symbolism. The symbolism that real Americans support is the symbolism of Norman Rockwell. It's the symbolism of storming the beach of Normandy. And you know what? There were many illegal immigrants. Whenever there was an illegal Italian involved in the mob, they got sent back. They got sent back.
David, you've got the floor to close this up. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I appreciate.
I'm sorry.
I appreciate those of you who have been respectful, most of you. And obviously, we don't agree on everything. And I'm trying to emphasize.
If we could let the Vice Mayor have his...
Dan, I appreciate it very much. It's good to be here.
I appreciate you coming. Thank you, and I apologize. Okay, to empower you, we do respect listening to everybody. Let's give the Vice Mayor a round of applause. We really appreciate him coming. Betsy, appreciate him coming. There are differences in opinion, but we're so happy to have you.